rancher saved a girl from being hanged by cutting the rope at last second. The town sat quietly between wide fields and low hills, a place where everyone knew each other's name and business. Life there followed the same slow pattern every day. People woke with the sun, worked until their hands were tired, and gathered in the evenings to talk about weather, crops, and small problems. Nothing big ever happened, and that was how the town liked it. The girl had lived there her whole life. She was young, quiet, and known for helping her mother with chores and neighbors with small favors. She did not cause trouble. She did not speak loudly. Most days, people barely noticed her as she passed through the dusty streets with her head slightly lowered. Yet one morning, everything changed. A rumor spread faster than fire in dry grass. It began with whispers near the marketplace. Someone said a serious crime had been committed. Someone else claimed they knew who was responsible. By noon, the story had grown sharp edges and a single name kept being repeated, the girl's name. No one could say exactly how the accusation started, but once it took hold, it refused to let go. The girl did not understand what was happening at first. She noticed people looking at her differently. Conversations stopped when she walked past. Doors that were once open now closed quickly. By evening, angry voices filled the square, and her name was spoken with blame instead of kindness. She stood frozen as the town elders questioned her. Their faces were hard, shaped by years of authority and pride. They did not shout, but their calm tone felt colder than anger. She tried to explain, but her words came out weak and scattered. Fear tightened her chest, and her thoughts refused to line up. No one asked the right questions. No one searched for the full truth. The girl had no powerful family to defend her, no wealth to hire help, no strong voice that could rise above the crowd. Each time she tried to speak, someone interrupted her. Each time she denied the accusation, someone shook their head as if the decision had already been made. He was a man of few words, known for working long days and keeping his distance from town arguments. His land sat far from the center, and he preferred the company of animals to people. He had seen enough of life to know that things were rarely as simple as they appeared. That day, he watched quietly. He noticed small things others ignored. He remembered seeing the girl earlier that same day, far from where the crime was said to have happened. He remembered the calm in her eyes then, nothing like the fear she now carried. Something felt wrong, but he stayed silent, unsure if his voice would matter. Elders spoke of order, tradition, and protecting the town's name. They claimed quick action was necessary to prevent more trouble. Their words sounded official and firm, and many people nodded along, relieved that someone seemed in control. The girl was taken away as the sun dipped low, leaving the square buzzing with restless energy. Some people felt uneasy, but most convinced themselves that the elders knew best. It was easier to trust authority than to question it. That night, the town did not sleep well. Lights burned longer than usual. Whispers passed through walls. The air felt heavy, as if something terrible was approaching. The girl sat alone, her thoughts racing between disbelief and terror. She replayed every moment of her day, searching for where things had gone wrong. She prayed silently, hoping someone would listen. The rancher lay awake on his land, staring at the dark ceiling. The image of the girl's frightened face refused to leave his mind. He told himself it was not his place to interfere. He told himself the town would sort things out. Still, a quiet voice inside him asked what would happen if they did not. By morning, the town had decided. Word spread that the punishment would be carried out publicly, before doubt or outside voices could interfere. The choice was rushed, wrapped in tradition and fear. People prepared as if it were just another task to complete before sunset. The girl was brought out as the town gathered again. She looked smaller than before, her steps slow and unsure. Her eyes searched the crowd, hoping to see someone she knew, someone who believed her. Most faces turned away. The rancher stood at the edge of the crowd, his jaw tight. He felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was no longer about rumor or fear. A line was being crossed, and once crossed, it could not be undone. He realized then that silence was also a choice. As the town moved forward, the rancher's heart pounded with growing urgency. He understood that if no one acted, the mistake would become permanent. The girl's life, her future, her very existence depended on someone standing up when it was hardest to do so. And though he had never planned to be that person, fate had quietly placed him there, watching, knowing, and facing a decision that would change everything. Part 1 ends with the town moving closer to an irreversible moment, and one man beginning to understand that doing nothing may be the greatest wrong of all. The next day began with an uneasy silence over the town. The sun rose as it always did, but its light felt weak, as if even it was unsure about what was coming. People stepped out of their homes slowly, speaking in low voices. No one laughed. No one greeted each other the way they used to. A heavy feeling followed everyone, even those who believed the girl was guilty. The elders met early that morning. They spoke behind closed doors, their voices firm and hurried. They believed that delay would only bring doubt, and doubt would bring trouble. Some of them felt a small pull of uncertainty in their hearts, but they pushed it aside. To them, acting fast meant keeping control. Outside, word spread quickly. The decision had been made. Everything would happen before the day ended. Some townspeople felt relief. They told themselves the town would finally be at peace again. Others felt sick but stayed quiet. In this town, speaking against the elders was seen as dangerous. Silence felt safer than standing alone. The girl sat in a small room, surrounded by rough walls and shadows. She had not slept. Her eyes burned from crying, though tears no longer fell. She tried to understand how her life had changed so suddenly. Just a day ago, she had been invisible. Now she was the center of the town's anger. She thought of her mother, who had passed away years earlier. She wished she could hear her voice one last time. She thought of small memories, helping neighbors, walking through fields, feeling free. Each memory felt like it belonged to someone else now. Fear wrapped around her, but beneath it was confusion. She knew she had done nothing wrong. That knowledge hurt more than the fear itself. If she were guilty, she might have understood the punishment. But innocence offered no protection here. Guards came for her when the sun climbed higher. They were not cruel, but they did not meet her eyes. They followed orders, telling themselves it was not their place to question them. As they led her outside, the fresh air felt strange, like a reminder of everything she was about to lose. The town had changed overnight. People stood along the paths, watching as she was taken through the streets. Some looked curious, some angry, some ashamed. Children were pulled back by their parents, told not to stare. The girl kept her eyes forward, afraid that if she looked around, she might break. At the edge of town, preparations were already underway. The place chosen was old, used long ago for serious punishments. Many had hoped it would never be used again. Seeing it prepared brought back memories the town preferred to forget. The rancher arrived early and stood far from the center. He watched men work with focused hands, moving as if they were building something ordinary. The calmness of it all disturbed him more than shouting ever could. He noticed the girl when she arrived. Her face was pale, but there was still a quiet strength in the way she stood. She did not scream. She did not beg. That alone made his chest tighten. He had seen fear before, but he had also seen lies. This was not a lie. The rancher tried to speak to one of the elders. He mentioned small details, things he remembered that did not match the story. The elder listened but did not really hear. He waved the rancher away, saying the decision was final and questioning it would only cause more harm. That was when the rancher understood something important. This was no longer about truth. It was about pride, fear, and the need to appear strong. As the hours passed, more people gathered. Some came out of curiosity. Others came because they felt they had to. The crowd grew thick, and the air grew tense. No one smiled. No one cheered. This was not justice. It was a moment everyone would remember, whether they wanted to or not. The girl was asked questions again, but the answers no longer mattered. Each word she spoke fell into empty space. Her voice shook, yet she spoke honestly, hoping someone would finally listen. A few people lowered their heads, unable to meet her eyes. The rancher felt time slipping away. With every step taken, every rope tied, the space for doubt grew smaller. He could feel his heart pounding, louder than the voices around him. He thought of his quiet life, his land, his animals. He had spent years avoiding trouble, believing that staying neutral kept him safe. Now he saw how fragile that belief was. Safety built on silence came at a terrible cost. The elders announced that everything was ready. Their voices echoed, steady and sure. To them, this was the end of a problem. To the girl, it was the end of everything she knew. She took a slow breath and looked up at the sky. The clouds drifted calmly, unaware of human fear and mistakes. For a moment she felt strangely calm. If this was truly the end, she wanted to face it with dignity. The rancher clenched his fists. He realized that once the final moment came, there would be no time for discussion, no chance for regret. Whatever happened next would define him forever. He could walk away and live with the memory, or he could act and face the consequences. As the town fell silent, waiting for what was about to happen, the rancher took a small step forward. His mind raced, his fear screaming at him to stop, but another voice, stronger and clearer, pushed him on. The rancher knew it would bring a lifelong wound, and as the final preparations came to an end, he understood that the next choice made, by him or by no one, would decide whether an innocent life was lost or saved. The moment felt stretched, as if time itself had slowed down. The air was thick, and every sound seemed louder than it should have been. The girl stood still, her hands trembling slightly, though she tried hard to hide it. She focused on breathing, one slow breath after another, as if that small act could keep her steady. The rancher watched her from a short distance. His heart beat so hard he could feel it in his ears. He had never felt this way before. Fear, doubt, and responsibility all pressed on him at once. He had faced storms, injuries, and losses in his life. But this was different. This was about a choice that could not be taken back. He looked around at the people he had known for years. Neighbors who once shared meals now stood with stiff faces. Some avoided looking at the girl. Others watched closely, trying to convince themselves they were doing the right thing. The rancher saw how easily people hid behind the crowd. When everyone shared the blame, no one felt fully responsible. His mind returned to small moments he had noticed earlier. The timing of the accusation. The lack of real proof. The way the story kept changing depending on who told it. These were not signs of truth, they were signs of fear spreading unchecked. He stepped forward again slowly, carefully. A few people noticed and whispered to each other. One elder glanced at him with annoyance, as if the rancher were an insect buzzing at the wrong moment. The rancher opened his mouth, then closed it again. His throat felt dry. What could he say that would change anything now? Words felt weak compared to the heavy decision already made. The girl finally looked at him. Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that look, he saw no guilt. He saw fear, yes, but also hope. Not the loud kind of hope, but a quiet one, fragile and fading. That look settled something inside him. He remembered his father's words from long ago, spoken during a hard winter when a neighbor needed help. If you see wrong and turn away, his father had said, you become part of it. He helped when he could, shared when asked, but he had never tested it in a moment like this. Now the lesson stood in front of him, demanding action instead of comfort. The crowd shifted. Someone cleared their throat. The elders exchanged brief looks, signaling that things should move forward. Their faces were calm, but their eyes showed strain. Even they felt the weight of what they were about to allow. The girl's breathing became faster. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. She wanted to speak again, to beg them to listen, but she knew it would change nothing. Her voice had already been dismissed. The rancher took another step, then another. Each step felt heavier than the last. People noticed now. Some frowned. Some looked confused. One man whispered that the rancher should stay back and not cause trouble. Trouble, the rancher thought bitterly, was already here. He thought of the life he had built, his land, his animals, the quiet mornings and long evenings. He knew that whatever he did next could cost him all of that. He could be pushed out, blamed, or worse. The town did not forgive easily, especially when its pride was challenged. Fear tightened his chest, but it no longer controlled him. He was not thinking about being brave. He was thinking about regret. He knew he could not live the rest of his life knowing he had stood there and done nothing. The elders began to speak again, their voices rising above the crowd. This was the final moment, they said. The time for questions had passed. The town needed to move on. The rancher felt a sharp clarity settle over him. If he waited any longer, the chance would be gone. He moved closer, faster now. A few people tried to stop him, placing hands on his arm, telling him to think carefully. He shook them off, not roughly, but firmly. His eyes never left the girl. Someone shouted for him to stop. Another voice yelled his name. But the sounds blended together, losing their meaning. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. The girl saw him coming and felt a sudden rush of confusion. She did not know what he intended to do. She had barely spoken to him before. But something in his expression told her this was not an act of harm. Hope flickered again, stronger this time. The rancher reached the center area and faced the elders. He spoke loudly, his voice shaking but clear. He said they were making a mistake. He said they had no proof. He said rushing forward would bring shame, not peace. For a moment the town froze. The elders argued back, accusing him of interfering and spreading doubt. They warned him to step aside and not turn himself into part of the problem. The rancher listened, then shook his head. "This is the problem," he said. "Not her." Silence followed. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. Some people in the crowd shifted uneasily. A few began to question what they were seeing. Doubt crept in, slow and unwelcome. But doubt alone was not enough to stop what was coming. The elders made a sharp motion, signaling for things to continue. They did not want to lose control. They believed stopping now would make them look weak. The rancher felt urgency flood through him. He understood then that words would no longer be enough. This moment demanded more than speech. It demanded action, no matter the cost. His hands trembled as he reached into his coat. He knew exactly what he was doing, and that knowledge scared him. But it also steadied him. There was no turning back now. The girl watched him closely, her heart racing. She did not know what would happen next, but for the first time since her nightmare began, she felt that someone truly saw her. The crowd held its breath. In that suspended moment, the rancher accepted whatever future waited for him. He did not know if the town would ever forgive him. He did not know if he would be forced to leave. But he knew. One thing with complete certainty. He would not let an innocent life be taken while he stood by and watched, and as the final signal approached, the rancher prepared himself to act, knowing that the next few seconds would change everything, for the girl, for the town, and for himself. Everything happened so fast that many people later struggled to remember the exact order of events. One moment, the town stood frozen in tense silence, and the next, the calm broke like thin glass. The elders gave the final signal, believing the matter was finished. Some people in the crowd closed their eyes. Others stared without blinking. The girl felt her body stiffen as fear rushed through her one last time. She held on to the only thing she had left. Hope, thin but stubborn. That was when the rancher moved. He stepped forward with sudden speed, no longer caring who saw him or who tried to stop him. A few people gasped. Someone shouted his name again, louder this time. Hands reached out to grab him, but he was already past them. The elders turned, shocked by his movement. For a split second, no one understood what he was about to do. The rancher's face was pale, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on one single goal. He was not thinking about the crowd. He was not thinking about punishment. He was thinking about the girl and the mistake that could not be undone. The girl noticed the change in the air before she understood it. The crowd's sound shifted, from quiet tension to sudden confusion. She looked up just in time to see the rancher reach forward. In one sharp motion, he acted. The moment broke apart. The rope gave way, and the girl dropped forward instead of what everyone feared. She hit the ground hard, gasping for air, shocked but alive. The sound of her breath filled the space like a sudden cry of truth. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. People shouted. Some screamed. Others rushed forward, unsure whether to help or pull back. The elders yelled orders, their calm voices cracking for the first time. Guards froze, uncertain which command to follow. The rancher stumbled back, his hands shaking now that it was over. The weight of what he had done hit him all at once. He had crossed a line the town believed could never be crossed. But the girl was alive. She lay on the ground, coughing and shaking, her body overwhelmed by fear and shock. A woman from the crowd rushed forward and knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around her. That single act seemed to unlock something in others. More people stepped in, helping her sit up, helping her breathe. The sight changed everything. This was no longer a distant punishment. This was a real person, trembling and broken, saved at the last possible second. The rancher raised his voice above the noise. His words came out rough but strong. He told them to look at her. He told them this was what their rush had nearly destroyed. He reminded them again that there had been no proof, no real search for truth. Some people shouted back at him, calling him reckless. Others stared at the ground, unable to face what they had almost allowed. The elders tried to regain control. They accused the rancher of causing disorder, of disrespecting tradition. They said he had turned the town into a mess. But their words did not carry the same power anymore. Too much had happened. The girl looked up at the rancher, tears running freely now. She could not speak, but her eyes said everything. Gratitude, disbelief, and deep exhaustion mixed together. She was alive, but the fear still clung to her like a shadow. A few people began to speak up. Quiet voices at first. They asked questions that should have been asked earlier. They pointed out details that no longer made sense. Doubt spread through the crowd, faster than the rumor ever had. The elders argued among themselves, their unity breaking. Some realized the damage had already been done. Others clung desperately to authority, afraid of what admitting a mistake would mean. The rancher stood firm. He did not shout anymore. He simply refused to step aside. If you want to punish someone, he said, punish me. But don't pretend this was right. Those words hit harder than anger ever could. The guards lowered their hands. They no longer looked certain. The crowd slowly began to change shape, no longer facing the same direction. Attention shifted from punishment to consequence. The girl was helped to her feet. She leaned heavily on those supporting her, weak but standing. Seeing her upright sent a wave of emotion through the people watching. Some wiped their eyes. Others looked away in shame. The elders finally called for a pause. It was the first crack in their certainty. The crowd buzzed with nervous energy. Nothing felt settled anymore. The rancher knew this moment did not mean victory. Saving the girl was only the beginning. Now came the harder part, facing the truth and surviving the town's reaction. The girl was taken away to a safe place, surrounded by those who now felt protective instead of angry. As she left, people watched her with new eyes. She was no longer just an accusation. She was proof of how close they had come to disaster. The rancher remained behind, facing the elders and the town. He felt every stare on him. Some faces held gratitude, others held anger. Many showed fear of what would happen next. The town stood at a crossroads, unsure whether to move forward or retreat into denial. The rancher did not know what punishment awaited him. He did not know if he would be forced to leave or lose everything he owned. But despite the uncertainty, he felt something unexpected inside him. Relief. No matter what came next, he had acted. He had chosen action over silence, truth over comfort. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows over the ground, the town slowly dispersed. Nothing felt normal anymore. Conversations were hushed, steps were heavy, and hearts were restless. The elders withdrew to argue behind closed doors, their authority shaken. The guards followed without confidence. The crowd thinned, leaving behind only the echoes of what had almost happened. The rancher stood alone for a moment, breathing deeply. His hands still trembled, but his mind was clear. He knew the town would not forget this day. Neither would he. Somewhere nearby, the girl sat wrapped in a blanket, surrounded by quiet support. She was alive, but changed forever. Fear would take time to fade. Trust would take even longer, yet one truth stood firm between them all. At the last second, one choice had changed everything. And from that moment on, the town could never pretend again that silence was harmless, or that rushing judgment came without a cost. The days after everything happened felt strange and heavy, as if the town was learning how to breathe again. Nothing returned to normal, and no one expected it to. People walked slower, spoke softer, and avoided each other's eyes more than before. The events of that day stayed alive in every corner of the town, even in silence. The girl was kept in a quiet house on the edge of town. Kind neighbors brought her food, clean clothes, and warm blankets. She did not talk much at first. Her body was safe, but her mind was still trapped in fear. Loud sounds made her flinch. Sudden movements made her heart race. At night, sleep came in short pieces, broken by memories she could not control. Still, she was alive. Each morning she reminded herself of that truth. She sat near the window, watching the sky, slowly teaching herself that the world had not ended. Some days were harder than others, but she did not give up. She had survived something that should never have happened. The rancher did not visit her right away. He stayed away out of respect, unsure if his presence would bring comfort or fear. He focused on his land, his animals, and the quiet work that usually calmed him. But his life no longer felt the same. Every familiar sound carried new meaning. Every quiet moment gave him time to think. He knew the town was watching him. Some people treated him like a hero, nodding when he passed, whispering words of thanks. Others avoided him completely. A few looked at him with anger, as if he had broken something that could never be fixed. In their eyes, he had challenged order, and order mattered more than truth. The elders met again and again, trying to decide what to do next. Their authority had been shaken, and they felt it. Some wanted to punish the rancher to prove they still held power. Others feared that doing so would only make things worse. The town was already divided, and another harsh decision could tear it apart. Slowly, the truth began to surface. Small details emerged. Timelines did not match. Stories changed. A few brave voices spoke up, admitting they had doubts from the beginning but were too afraid to speak. The pressure that once pushed everyone toward the girl now turned inward, forcing the town to face its own mistakes. Eventually, the real cause behind the accusation was uncovered. It was not what most people expected. It was smaller, rooted in fear, misunderstanding, and someone else's desire to hide their own wrongdoing. When the truth came out, it did not bring relief. It brought shame. The girl was officially cleared of all blame. The announcement was made publicly, but no words could erase what she had been through. Apologies followed, some sincere, some awkward, some too late. She listened quietly, accepting what she could and letting the rest pass through her. One afternoon, the rancher finally came to see her. He stood at the door for a long moment before knocking, unsure if she would want to see him. When she opened the door and saw him, her eyes filled with tears. She did not say anything at first. She simply stepped aside and let him in. They sat in silence for a while. Then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. She thanked him, not with big words, but with simple ones that came from deep inside her. She told him she did not know how to repay him. The rancher shook his head and told her she owed him nothing. He said he only did what anyone should do. Even as he said it, he knew how rare that choice had been. The conversation was quiet and gentle. No drama, no speeches. Just two people sharing the weight of something that had changed them both. As time passed, the town slowly adjusted. Some people learned from what happened. They became more careful, more willing to ask questions instead of following fear. Others remained defensive, uncomfortable with the reminder of their silence. Healing did not happen all at once. It came in small steps, uneven and slow. The girl decided not to leave the town, at least not yet. Part of her wanted to run far away, to a place where no one knew her story. But another part of her wanted to stay and reclaim what fear had tried to steal. She began helping again, little by little, rebuilding trust on her own terms. The rancher faced consequences too, though not the ones many expected. He was asked to step away from town meetings. His voice was no longer welcomed in some spaces. But he did not regret his choice. The cost of silence, he knew now, was far greater. Over time, children in the town began to hear the story, told in quieter, careful ways. It became a lesson passed down, not as gossip, but as a warning. A reminder of what happens when fear moves faster than truth. Years later, people would still speak of that day, not with pride, but with reflection. They would remember the girl who survived and the man who refused to look away. They would remember how close they came to a mistake that could never be undone. And they would remember that one person, standing alone, can change the direction of many. The girl grew stronger. Not because the pain disappeared, but because she learned how to live alongside it. She found purpose again, helped others, and slowly rebuilt a sense of safety. Her life was different, but it was still hers. The rancher returned to his quiet routines, though he was no longer the same man. He carried the memory with him, not as a burden, but as a guide. Whenever doubt crept in, he reminded himself of what happens when courage shows up at the last moment. The town, too, was changed forever. It became a place that remembered. A place that had learned painfully that justice requires patience and truth requires voices willing to speak when it is hardest. And in the end, that was the real story. Not just about rescue at the last second, but about the cost of fear, the power of choice, and how one act of courage can echo long after the moment has passed.